We've all heard about the Bermuda Triangle. Also known as the Devil's Triangle, it is loosely defined as being a region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. A number of aircraft and ships are said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Since then, planes changed their flight path to avoid the triangle. Others avoid going anywhere near it altogether. But did you know New York has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle? It is located in Midtown, more specifically a large radius around the Empire State Building. Starting in 2008, drivers started to complain about the 5-block radius around the Empire State. Their cars would inexplicably die and refuse to start up again. It was almost every day, says Ronnie Yakubovich, manager of NYC Tire and Auto Care. He went on to explain that he would pick up the cars and tow them outside of the radius and they would suddenly start to work as normal. His best guess is that the radio signals from the broadcast beacon on the tower were disabling alarm systems in cars and preventing them from starting. But if that was so, why did this only start in 2008? The Empire State Building was opened in 1931, so why did this start so recently? I guess we'll never know what is causing the phenomenon. Maybe just avoid the area if you can. In at number 4, Super Rats of Hurricane Sandy. One New Yorker told the story of him and his roommates. They had lived peacefully in a 5th floor loft for years with barely a cockroach invading the space. Then, the winter after Hurricane Sandy, the noises began, scratching and scurrying. I walked into the kitchen one day and saw a rat the size of a small cat crawling across our food shelves, Kevin says. Traps and an exterminator proved ineffective. It was baffling that the rats would find their way to the 5th floor. Then the roommates read reports about rats fleeing inland from flooded subway tunnels after Hurricane Sandy. A theory was going around that the weaker rats were wiped out and the surviving rodents bred a new generation of tougher, meaner super rats. There are reports of super rats even today. Some businesses demand that the city steps in and does something as outside dining became more normal within the last year. The diners were being harassed by the giant rats. Many diners have had to leave due to the dangerous nature of the giant animals. They claimed the rats were getting increasingly hungry with the lack of tourism, leaving them with less to feed off on the streets. The city continues to claim that these super rats do not exist despite the number of sightings and photos of the giant rodents. Many live in fear that the rats might make their way into the apartments as they are harder to kill than the usual infestation. In at number 3 we have Cropsey. In the mid-90s, Ariel Abramowitz went to camp across from the notorious disused mental institution Willowbrook in Staten Island. She recalls counselors taking campers to an old building on the site, with something like blood smeared on the walls. They spooked them with tales of a boogeyman named Cropsey. Allegedly, he was a respected community member. He has a family and a child who he loved. One summer, he sent his child to the local camp. His son was later confirmed to have died at the camp. This sent the man mad. He disappeared from his life. No one knew where he had gone, but before he left, he vowed to get revenge on the other kids and campers. He was later found and taken to a mental hospital. The next time we would hear of him, he was described as a homicidal madman, an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system that lay under the abandoned ruins of the old Seaview Hospital, a former tuberculosis sanitarium. Soon the urban legend would be unmasked as Andre Rand. Rand worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, a place whose name alone has the power to frighten adults and children alike. The institution, built as a respite for children with intellectual disabilities, was revealed to be a living hell in the 1970s, although authorities wouldn't close the school until 1987. Rand had a long rap sheet of crimes against children. In 1983, he went to jail again after kidnapping a bus full of kids from the local YMCA and driving them to an airport. And though there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge him, police already suspected him in the disappearances of at least 4 other Staten Islanders. To this day, none of the bodies have been found. Rand's story and that of Cropsey continues to fascinate and horrify tri-state residents to this day. Coming in at number 2 we have Haunted Dakota. The Dakota building set the standard for Upper West Side apartment living, built at a time when the upper classes were only just becoming familiar with the concept of living in an apartment. It was known for having famous artists as residents, and the board were very picky about who they allowed to live there. One of the most famous couples to live at the Dakota was John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono. Years after John Lennon was shot dead in front of his Central Park West apartment building, the Dakota, his widow Yoko Ono saw his ghost sitting at his white piano. She claims he turned to her and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm still with you." When he was alive, Lennon himself claimed to have spotted a figure wandering the halls of the Dakota, whom he referred to as the crying Lady ghost. Other residents are said to have encountered the spectre of a little girl about 7 years old, smiling and laughing and greeting people in the hallways. The Dakota's original owner, Edward Clark, had an interest in the paranormal and would often host seances to communicate with the dead. The more you play with the paranormal, the more likely you are to experience paranormal activity in the future, says paranormal researcher. She believes that when people are murdered suddenly and violently, their spirits linger. In John Lennon's case, his life was cut short in his prime. He was only 40 years old. Someone like him was happy to be alive. He was working, he had a small child, he had unfinished business. It's a prime recipe for a classic haunting. And finally, in at number 1, we have mole people. There are around 700 miles of subway tracks underneath New York City. Did you know that the large sections of the track that isn't used is home to the mole people? Thousands of homeless people and families have created a community underground. The mole people are living under popular parts of town without the people who are walking above even knowing they are there. They travel under cover of darkness as not to be evicted from their underground homes. Ever since the Great Depression, there have been many homeless people in New York City. During the difficult period, people started using the subway tunnels as a place to live. The places where homeless people live are dangerous. Rodents and reptiles lurk through the tunnels. There are debris and other hazards in the dark, plus the darkness conceals criminals, and mole people are often the victims of attacks. Thieves even steal what little they have. The entrances to the subway tunnels are easily accessible by anyone who has the desire to venture into them. There are numerous entrances throughout the city. However, it is illegal to enter, and going into them can result in criminal charges. Just like any place that numerous people live, the mole people form communities. Most of them look after each other, but there is also a kind of hierarchy. Most of them are very territorial over the section of the tunnels where they live. After all, it is their home. There are couples and even families that live underground. The sad part is these people risk losing their kids if authorities find out they do not have a place to live. So the families living in the subway do their best to stay concealed. People are not the only ones living in the subway tunnels under New York City though. Many animals live beneath the streets. Some of the mole people even domesticate these animals and live with them. These animals keep them company in the very isolated and lonely place they call home. The mole people do anything they can to eat and obtain the things they need. It's difficult for them though. They have to wait until it's dark to emerge from their homes. If authorities see them, they risk getting in trouble. Throughout the years, the city has made efforts to clean sections of the subway tunnels. However, the task is so vast that many abandoned areas remain untouched, especially the parts of the system that are no longer in use. As the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Coming in at number 5, we have Hell's Gate in Oxford. Known as the most haunted bridge, we have Hell's Gate in Oxford, Alabama. Hell's Gate Bridge earned its name because many people believe that when you stop on the bridge and glance over your shoulder, the road behind you resembles the fiery gates of hell. Several locals have experienced this over the years, but that isn't all of it. The most popular urban legend about this bridge takes place during the 1950s when a young couple's car drove off the bridge and into the water below. Supposedly, if you stop on the bridge and turn off your lights, a member of the couple will enter your vehicle and leave a wet spot on the seat. The bridge was officially closed to traffic in late 2005 and early 2006 when the new road, known as Leon Smith Parkway, was built from Friendship Road to the Oxford Exchange, connecting it to the new outdoor mall. On Saturday, January 13, 2007, the legend of the bridge lives on, as after it was closed, the OPS team decided to go to this bridge and investigate the paranormal activity claims. The team arrived at the site around 10 PM and placed voice recorders on each end of the bridge. In the middle, they set up a webcam suited for night viewing and took lots of pictures with the digital and 35mm cameras. They wrapped up their investigation sometime after midnight. After going through the evidence, they did not detect anything that night, though one of the members did see an object coming toward the group while we were sitting on the end of a bridge. And just because nothing suspicious was caught that night doesn't mean it isn't haunted. Coming in at number 4, we have the vanishing of Orion Williamson. This urban legend is different from most and revolves around the farmer Orion Williamson. One hot July afternoon in 1854, Orion was walking on his farm near Selma. Reportedly, Williamson's wife and family were on the front porch of the farmhouse. Then, neighbors passed by and waved to Williamson, who was walking in ankle-deep grass. Orion waved back before vanishing right before the eyes of his family and neighbors. The party ran to the site, frantically searching, but found no sign of Williamson. Soon, a search party was formed, and 300 men are said to have come to search for the farmer. No sign of Orion materialized materialized, even though the effort continued well into the night. As news of the inexplicable vanishment spread, more volunteers and a team of geologists arrived. They dug up the field to see if the ground was in any way unstable or unusual. There was only solid rock a few feet below the surface. No holes, crevices, or cave-ins, nothing that could explain the event. Reportedly, Mrs. Williamson and her son could hear Orion's voice calling for help for weeks afterward, growing fainter and fainter. Each time they would rush out onto the field only to find nothing. Gradually, Orion's voice faded into a mere whisper, then disappeared forever. After no amount of searching turned up anything, the judge declared Orion dead. The following spring, it is said, a circle of dead grass appeared to mark the spot of the unlucky farmer's disappearance. The German scientist Maximilian Hearn, author of the book Disappearance and Theory Thereof, speculated that Orion walked into a spot of universal ether. He believed these places lasted a few seconds and could completely destroy all matter within them. Another scientist theorized a magnetic field had disintegrated Orion's atomic structure and sent him into another dimension. In at number 3, we have the ghost of Sally Carter. The story of Sally Carter begins in the mansion of Cedarhurst in 1823 when Sally was visiting her sister. While she was visiting, she was struck by a quick and fatal illness and passed away on November 28, 1837, just 3 weeks short of her 16th birthday. Sally had loved the estate, and that is why some say you can still feel her presence there today. Reports of Sally's ghost go back to 1919 when a 17-year-old boy from Dothan, Alabama slept outside Sally's bedroom. That stormy night he had a dream that Sally visited him, asking him to prop up her tombstone. When he awoke the next morning, he explained the strange dream and told his family that he was going to Sally's grave. They laughed at him, but when he arrived, her stone had indeed fallen over in the storm. This popular local legend ends with the boy going back to his hometown of Dothan, never to return to Huntsville again. Sally's grave was in the family plot on the estate. She had so many visitors, there was a well-worn path from the road. She did unfortunately also have many teenagers vandalize her grave. That is why in December of 1982, Sally, her sister, and her sister's 3 children were relocated to an undisclosed location in the Maple Hill Cemetery. Her casket was relocated, but some claim that when her grave was excavated, the casket Sally was supposed to spend eternity in was empty, besides tombstones falling over and caskets being empty of mortal remains. Others have reported seeing sights of Sally walking the grounds of the estate she loved so much. A past guard at Cedarhurst heard Sally walking upstairs while working one night. After the woman's shift ended, she realized that she had lost some money while doing rounds. After searching the grounds, hearing footsteps following her and the unnerving flickering of her flashlight as if the batteries were ready to die, the guard gave up the money for lost. But once she returned to the guard shack, her flashlight flickered brightly, shining directly on the cash she had given up looking for. It was then she chose to thank Sally and claims to have heard a young woman's laugh in return. Someone who knew both the Thornton and Grace families who lived in the house had a friend who slept in Sally's room. When asked what it was like, the friend told him about doors opening and closing by themselves, covers getting snatched off the bed, and light switches being tripped. The girl thought it was all rather annoying, but after a while got used to it and ignored the strange things going on. In at number 2, we have Hugging Molly. This urban legend comprises of the witch of Hugging Molly, haunting the town of Abbeville, Alabama. Legend claims that a phantom woman would appear to children, but only at night. The witch would squeeze them tightly and then proceed to scream in their ears, though she never harmed them other than causing ringing in their ears. Molly had been described as a 7-foot figure, wearing dark clothes and a wide-brimmed hat. Jimmy Rain, an Abbeville local and lifelong resident, grew up hearing the legend of Hugging Molly. For him and his friends, she was more than just an urban legend, but a real ghost haunting the grounds of his town. One night, Jimmy and his good friend Tommy Murphy heard the story from Tommy's dad. His dad told them he knew Hugging Molly was real because she had sprung from the shadows and hugged him one night. They were convinced it had to be true. Who Molly is still up for debate, but many believe that she lost her own children and go after local children to make up for the lost time with her own child. Some say her ghost still walks the street of Abbeville late in the night, sweeping her black skirt as she goes. And finally, in at number 1, we have Slag of Smelter furnace. From 1882 to 1971, Birmingham Sloss furnaces transformed coal and ore from surrounding acres into the hard steel that would pave the way for the Industrial Revolution. In the early 1900s, James Slaggs Wormwood was foreman of the graveyard shift, the period between sunset and sunrise, where he was in charge of a crew of nearly 150 workers. During the summer months, the temperatures throughout the plant would reach more than 120 degrees. Lack of sleep, the heat, and low visibility made working the furnace literally a living living hell, and only the poorest of workers desperate for employment would work it. To impress his supervisors, James Slag would make his workers take dangerous risks, forcing them to speed up production. During his reign, 47 workers lost their lives, 10 times more than any other shift in the history of the furnace. Countless others lost their ability to work due to accidents, mishaps, and even a recorded explosion in the small blowing engine house in 1888 that left 6 workers burned blind. In October of 1906, James Slag's Wormwood lost his footing at the top of the highest blast furnace and plummeted into a pool of melted iron ore, where he melted instantly. It was reported that Slag must have become dizzy from the methane gas created by the furnace and lost his balance, but Slag had never set foot on top of the furnace during his years of employment, leaving the death of James still a mystery. The legend of Slag grew each year after his disappearance. Workers complained of an unnatural presence they increasingly encountered throughout the worksite. One work reports that on a night watchman in 1926 they sustained injuries after being pushed from behind and told angrily by a deep voice to get back to work. The man, upon searching the grounds, could find no sign of any other living person, only to assume it was the spirit of James Slag. Another suspicious story happened in 1947 when 3 supervisors turned up missing, where they would be found unconscious and locked in the small boiler room in the southeastern part of the plant. None of the 3 could explain exactly what happened to them. All agreed they were approached by a man whose skin appeared badly burnt and who angrily shouted at them to push some steel. Probably the most horrifying tale occurred in 1971 when the night before the plant closed, Samuel Blumenthal, the Schloss night watchman, who was nostalgically taking a last look about, found himself face to face with what he recalls being the most frightening thing he had ever seen. He described it simply as evil and a half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. When Blumenthal refused, the monster began to hit him. In addition, another investigation was held in 2003 by the Alabama Foundation for Paranormal Research, who insisted that there is no doubt paranormal activity on the grounds of the plant. During their investigations, they pulled data that confirms through scientific methods that the spirit entities are present and cannot be explained, while also stating that Schloss is one of the most paranormally active places our team has investigated.
Number 5 on this list is the Empress of Little Rock. The Empress of Little Rock, that just sounds imposing, man. Like a mission in Red Dead Redemption 2 or something like that. Arkansas urban legend says, originally built as the most extravagant dwelling in the state by wealthy saloon keeper James H. Hornibrook, the house currently operates as the Empress of Little Rock, a luxury bed and breakfast. Several paranormal encounters had been witnessed by former owner Robert H. Blair, workers, and guests. Blair saw a period-dressed gentleman complete with top hat floating down the stairs. While restoring the secret poker room in the attic, hired painter Timmy Watts found himself locked out even though no handle or lock was on the door yet. When he returned with a screwdriver to let himself back in, Watts saw that the door was now open and the same image of a man that Blair previously witnessed appeared before him. That is one frightening story from Watts there. The door gets locked even though it literally physically cannot get locked, and then it gets unlocked and you see a man appear before you. Very questionable. Also, just the fact that you were also in the secret poker room in the attic as well. Like, you already know that some shady stuff probably went down up there after hours. I imagine that those walls have been host to some very questionable activities themselves. Either way, this place is super haunted. Lots of the locals don't ever stay here anymore for fear of what could be lurking here. They tell the newcomers about it, but oftentimes the newcomers don't heed their warnings and go there anyways. Usually, after they've done so, there's deep regret that's filled inside of them. Pretty much everybody that goes and stays here wishes that they hadn't. Number 4 on this list is the Mount Holly Cemetery. I feel like every state, every province, every country, every region, pretty much everywhere has got to have their own urban legend about a haunted cemetery. Like, there's always one place where there've just been too many strange occurrences. Well, Arkansas is no different, and they have their own cemetery with legends surrounding it. Arkansas urban legend says, located at Broadway and 12th Streets in Little Rock, Mount Holly Cemetery is the final resting place for many notable people. Several reports of paranormal sightings and photographs taken at the property have been made, including apparitions of people dressed in period clothing and bright lights and mists. Some visitors have claimed that statues have been mysteriously relocated to the lawns of nearby houses. The sounds of a flute echo have also been heard, and trinkets and small items have been known to appear and disappear around the graves. I wonder what that flute echo is. Could it be some sort of spirit who just really likes the flute? What if it's something more sinister than that? The flute has often been tied to some pretty bad and devilish demons before. Is it possible that one of these creatures is afoot and using this flute to perform some sort of bad ritual? I would ask you guys to be the judge for yourselves, but that would mean that you'd probably need to go to this place, which I highly recommend not doing. Number 3 on this list is the 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa. Well, this sucks, guys. A nice spa and hotel ruined once again because of ghosts and a pesky urban legend. Arkansas urban legend says the legendary 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa is one of the most popular haunted Arkansas destinations. Visitors can stay overnight and take tours revealing the secret underground passages, the property's old morgue, and hear the multitude of hauntings that have been reported throughout the years. The most well-known ghost of the Crescent is Michael, a stonecutter who helped build the hotel and who fell to his death at the location of room 218. Michael is said to have been a womanizer who often got in trouble for flirting with the ladies. Room 218 is now the Crescent's most requested room. Another paranormal guest of the hotel is Dr. John Fremont Ellis, former hotel physician. Dressed in top hat and fine clothing, he's been seen on the staircase from the second floor to the lobby, and smoke from Ellis's tobacco pipe is sometimes smelled near the elevator. Look out for a disappearing pool of blood, a resident morgue ghost around the autopsy table, and more eerie sightings. Oh yeah guys, just casually look out for that disappearing pool of blood and dead ghosts that's out and about. No big deal. Oh, and also the ghost of a doctor who just walks around and does weird haunted crap. Totally cool, man. All very casual. Yeah, that's a big no, everybody. Spas are supposed to be relaxing. There is nothing relaxing about doctors and dead people and blood. I'll get my massages elsewhere, thank you very much. Number 2 on this list is the Toltec Mounds. Once again, we have another creepy name that could be a Red Dead Redemption 2 mission. Arkansas urban legend says, known to some as the Stonehenge of Arkansas, the mounds and earthen embankments present at Toltec Mounds Archaeological State Park are remnants of the Plume Bayou culture, not the Mexican Toltec or Aztec tribes as the name suggests. The Plume Bayou people built 18 mounds to serve as a ceremonial, religious, governmental, and social complex with at least one serving as a burial mound. Archaeological digs at the site have uncovered items that cannot be traced to other Native American cultures and also have suggested that the Plume Bayou people simply disappeared with no trace of where they went or why they left. Visitors to the present day park have claimed to see lights, orbs, and even ghostly apparitions of ancient people. At night, footsteps have been heard around the existing mound site. I have no idea what those orbs are or who they're coming from, but I don't want any part of it, folks. Clearly, there is a deep spiritual energy at this place that does not want to be messed with. By having all these warning signs, we should know that by now. I think that we should listen to it and stay away. And finally, number 1 on this list is the natural steps. The Earth is a big place, and seeing that it's such a big place, occasionally it makes some pretty cool geological things. Sometimes these weird occurrences, though, are a bit too strange for anyone's liking. Arkansas urban legend says, a unique geological formation along the banks of the Arkansas River, Natural Steps is a small town with an unsettling history of buildings, structures, and people disappearing. Days after a local couple's wedding atop the Natural Steps, the groom perished from a sudden and mysterious illness. Overwhelmed with grief, the widow disappeared after the funeral, many believe by committing suicide by jumping off the Natural Steps. Residents and visitors alike have since reported seeing a woman in white strolling within the town. During the Civil War, Confederate forces are believed to have sunk their own gunboat containing vast sums of gold in order to keep Union troops at bay. 3 Confederate soldiers died during the explosion, and their graves can be found in the town cemetery. Legend has it, on moonlit nights, the ghosts of the 3 soldiers march in a single file line to the Arkansas River to uncover their hidden treasure. So we have multiple things going on at these steps / town / urban legend hell spot. We have a groom who has apparently taken their own life. Then we have his wife, who apparently haunts the area now because she's really upset about her groom who took his own life. Then we have Confederate soldiers wandering about because of some gunboat that went under in a big explosion. And then when the moon is out, apparently these soldiers decide that they want to go treasure hunting and go walk about to find it. This is just one big symphony of creepy. The only time I'd recommend going to this spot spot is when the moon is fully out just to see if you can find the treasure, but even that is a big risk. Number 5 in this list is the Arkansas Highway 365. There is quite the tale that surrounds this highway in Arkansas, one that makes driving on it quite scary. Arkansas.com says, years ago a young man was driving down Arkansas 365 south of Little Rock when he saw a young girl on the roadside. He offered to give her a lift and draped his coat over her shoulders because she was cold and soaked from the rain. She gave him directions to her house. When the young man got out of the car and walked around to the other side to help her out of her seat, no one was there. Confused, the man walked up to the house and knocked on the door. A woman answered and she explained what had occurred. She said, "That young girl is my daughter who was killed years ago. She hitchhikes back home once a year." The young man then drove to the cemetery to see the young girl's grave. There he found his coat draped over her tombstone. This is just one of the stories of this young girl, but this happens, as the woman suggested, once a year. Once a year, a good Samaritan who is simply trying to help the young girl will be fooled into driving a ghost around for a few hours. I have no idea how that dude, after getting to the cemetery, was able to get in his car and keep driving after that. Like, the second I saw my coat dangling from the tombstone like that, I would immediately tapped out. I couldn't figure out what time of year this happens at, which is too bad, because then I could have warned you guys, but be aware that it will happen without fail at least once. So if you do see a young girl on the side of the road along this highway, definitely stop to help, but just know you might be picking up a ghost. Number 4 on this list is Mary Walters. The legend of Mary Walters goes hand in hand with the legend and haunting that surrounds Curran Hall. Arkansas.com says, currently the home of the Little Rock Visitors Information Center, the house was originally built by Colonel Ebenezer Walters for his young bride Mary. Mary Walters was never able to see the completed structure as she died in childbirth just before the house was finished. Grief-stricken, Colonel Walters left the state and the house was owned by several different people, some of whom have reported experiencing the presence of Mary Walters. Visitor center staff have also experienced eerie occurrences, including a picture coming off the wall and a coffee machine making coffee with no grounds or water present. Mary Walters apparently haunts this ground now and the areas surrounding it. Nobody really knows what it is that she wants, just that she's here all the time, haunting everyone and everything. I guess she must really be fascinated by the coffee maker though, because that's often a device that she haunts and messes with. Maybe just technology in general is something that gets to her. Considering she never got to see this building get finished, to see it now, totally finished, and also with literal futuristic stuff in it would be kinda crazy. Well, I guess normal stuff for us, but futuristic stuff for her. Either way, she isn't said to be a dangerous ghost, just an annoying one. Be wary if you ever end up at Curran Hall, Mary Walters might be watching. Number 3 on this list is the Clayton House. This has got to be one of the most haunted spots in Arkansas, and it's developed quite the legend around it. Arkansas.com says, originally serving as the residence for William Henry Harrison Clayton and his family, the Clayton House has also been home to several paranormal experiences. Director Martha Seiler and her employees steer clear of a bedroom on the second floor where the sounds of boots stomping and doors slamming have been heard. In Clayton's study, Seiler and her daughter have both seen an apparition of a woman with gray hair dressed in brown. A carpenter took some pictures while working on the house, and when he got them back, a woman appeared. Paranormal investigators have captured several recordings in the house, including one of a cat meowing and a man yelling an obscenity. When the public was invited on these investigations, a woman reported her hair being tugged and a man saw a person's face. Wow, so there is a lot going on here and a lot to break down. First off, we have the sounds that are coming from the second floor. Boots stamping on the ground and doors slamming. Is this potentially the ghost of William Henry Harrison Clayton expressing his disapproval of something? If so, what is he trying to tell us and why does he seem so mad? Second off, we have the woman who's appearing in the Clayton study. Who is she? Is she the wife of William? And what would have happened to her that has caused her ghost to stay here? I imagine it must have been something pretty tragic. Then we have a carpenter taking pictures and a woman show up in them who wasn't there. Is this the same woman who was in the study, or is this a different woman entirely? And finally, we have some paranormal investigators capturing literal recordings of the ghosts and ghouls who reside here. Also, they captured a cat, too. Don't know if that was just a cat or a ghost cat or like what the cat has to do with it, but now we have to factor that into this mess of a place as well. One big circus of ghosts is what this house is, and the thing that has stumped everyone is why. From my research, I couldn't find any horrific tragedies that went down here. It's just an old house. I guess sometimes it really do just be like that, and this place was just meant to be haunted. Number 2 on this list is the Allen House. What is it with Arkansas and these creepy houses, man? And they all have creepy names too. Like the Allen House. Who the heck would want to stay at the Allen House? Anyways, Arkansas.com says, built in 1906, the Allen House is located along North Main Street and features Gothic-style architecture and wrought iron fencing. The house was planned by local businessman Joe Lee Allen to be the most impressive house the town had ever seen. Unfortunately, in December 1948, the family experienced a grave tragedy. Their daughter, Liddell, consumed mercury cyanide-laced punch in the house's master suite. Out of grief, her mother sealed off the room, and it would not be entered by anyone for nearly 4 decades. During its time as an apartment building in the 1950s, tenants would report eerie occurrences including hazy figures appearing in photographs, furniture being unexplainably rearranged, and several reports of a lady sitting in a turret window. So at least with this house we have a reason as to why it's haunted. In the last one we didn't even know, there wasn't anything clear. I think this one is pretty clear and obvious though. Liddell took her own life in the master suite, and the mother completely sealed off that room, effectively trapping any spirit or paranormal energy in there. Such a tragic story that you never want to hear. Now we can't forget that story either because the paranormal events, and I'm assuming Liddell's spirit, keeps haunting this place. Avoid the Allen House altogether if you're ever in Arkansas. And finally, number 1 on this list is Ghost Mountain. This is definitely the sickest and most twisted story on this list for sure. Arkansas.com says, a tragic story surrounds a mountain southeast of Drake Field Airport in Fayetteville. In the 1930s, a man came home to his wife and child after a long night of drinking. His wife had been up all night caring for the sick child whose incessant crying had made the inebriated father furious. In his anger, he grabbed the baby, stumbled outside, and threw the child down their well. His wife grabbed the well's rope in an attempt to save the baby, but the father cut the rope, leaving the wife and child in the well. The father left town never to be seen again. Reports have been made that a woman's screams and a baby's crying can still be heard in this location. If this story is true, then my god, this father rivals the most sick and twisted individuals to ever walk this earth. I don't care how drunk you are, to take your kid and to throw your own child, your own flesh and blood, into a well, and then have your wife follow that child, and to leave them there. This is the scum of the earth, guys. It's no wonder this place is haunted based on an event like this. My heart just goes out to that child and that wife, and hopefully one day their souls can find peace.
Coming in at number 5, we have Space Mountain. There are a surprising amount of urban legends surrounding this ride at Disney World, which is odd. It is just a ride after all, right? Nothing strange about it. According to legend, one rider was decapitated while on Space Mountain because he supposedly stood up while riding. What an idiot. Now this is only a little bit true. There was a decapitation, but it was on a test dummy, not a real person. No person has ever been killed while riding Space Mountain. However, there is another dark legend that surrounds this ride. According to legend, on Space Mountain you can find Mr. One-Way. Some accounts describe Mr. One-Way as a red-haired man with a red face, with stories stating that he hangs out in the line for Space Mountain. But this differs depending on who you ask. According to video footage, Mr. One-Way will sometimes get onto the ride with other passengers, grabbing an available seat. However, it is said that he disappears right before you reach the final tunnel at the end of the ride. On top of that, there is supposedly a second ghost called Disco Debbie, who is also said to haunt Space Mountain, and according to some riders, she glows in the dark. Very freaky indeed. Coming in at number 4, we have Magnolia Creek Lake. Magnolia was once a thriving riverport town in southern Wakulla County, Florida, which was established all the way back in the 1820s and is now classified as an extinct city by the State Library and Archives of Florida. All that remains of the city is a cemetery, with the last known burial being back in 1859. Magnolia Creek Lane is a narrow road fit for one car at a time south of Montverde on the west side of Lake Apopka. According to legend, the road and surrounding lake is haunted by around 200 passengers who were killed in a train wreck. However, many have attempted to find evidence of this, but none has ever been found, yet the legend continues. Now, while the road appears to be built on an old train track, the only documented railroad runs slightly north of the location. Now, this road is supposedly where all kinds of horrible things happened back in the 1890s, and according to some locals at the creek that runs to Lake Apopka, you can hear the loud screams in the woods. However, when you get closer, they move farther away. The screams are said to be that of the train crew that died. However, skeptics believe this is actually sound that is being reflected from another place. According to a local, Michelle, she said, I quote, "My cousin went to Montverde Academy and heard about this road that runs off 455 that used to be a railroad bed. And they say that if you go down there at night, you can hear ghostly sounds and see eerie shadows of people walking on the road. I don't know for sure about this because I never went there, so it is just what I heard." Coming in at number 3, I-4 Dead Zone. Interstate 4 is a highway in Florida that spans 132 miles, with it running from Tampa all the way to Daytona Beach. Now, the interstate is frequented daily by folks heading to work and those on their way to Disney World. Now, while it is a popular highway, it is also another nickname for it, the Dead Zone, an area where folks need to be particularly careful. This area of the highway has been the location of many accidents, electronic malfunctions, as well as supposed ghost sightings. So why exactly is this spot so dangerous and filled with so much paranormal activity? Well, this is because this quarter mile of highway was built over a gravesite, and as we know from movies, a disturbed gravesite means bad news bears. It means you're in for a nasty surprise. It means you're gonna die. Don't believe it? Well, oddly enough, on the very first day the new interstate was opened, a tractor trailer carrying frozen goods lost control and crashed directly above the disturbed graves of people who had died from yellow fever. It is believed that around 1,500 to 2,000 accidents have occurred on the highway since 1963, which is a lot. And worse still, many of those accidents resulted in death, and between a 24-month period, there were around 44 car accidents, resulting in approximately 65 people being injured. Some locals fear this area of the highway so much that they actually take a much longer route around it. On top of all of this, back in the 1950s, a young boy was said to have disturbed the graves, and the following night he was killed by a drunk driver. And to add insult to injury, the driver was never caught. Coming in at number 2, we have the Devil's Chair, also known as the Haunted Chair. This is an urban legend hailing from folklore that is attached to a class of funerary or memorial sculpture common throughout the United States during the 19th century. Now, these chairs were known as the mourning chairs for visitors to cemeteries to sit on when visiting loved ones. However, since then, cemeteries have provided benches for similar purposes. Once the original purpose of these chairs fell out of fashion, superstition quickly developed in association with sitting in the chair. For example, some young people dare one another to visit the site, most often after dark or at midnight, or in some cases on Halloween. Stories state that if you sit in the chair at these specific times, something awful will happen, with people fearing that they will be punished. In Florida specifically, the Devil's Chair is located in Cassadaga, Florida, and is a graveside bench in the cemetery that borders Cassadaga as well as Lake Helen. According to legend, an unopened can of beer left on the chair will be empty by morning. Now, in some stories, the can has already been opened, and in others, the liquid is simply gone through the unopened top. On top of that, it is said that the devil will sometimes appear to anyone bold enough to sit in the chair itself. So if you do decide to visit the chair at night and take a seat expecting to meet the devil, just be sure to have a beer in hand ready for him, because it is said that he will be expecting one. As am I, all the time. I would like a beer. Maybe that's why I'm evil. I'm the devil. And finally, coming in at number 1, Legend of the Skunk Ape. Also known as the Swamp Cabbage Man, Swamp Ape, Stink Ape, Florida Bigfoot, and Louisiana Bigfoot, this is a creature that is said to inhabit Florida and is named for its appearance and for its unpleasant odor that is said to accompany it. The ape has supposedly been a part of Florida folklore since the settler period, which is absolutely insane. One of the first reports of the skunk ape in Florida came from the year 1818, when a report spoke of a man-sized monkey or ape raiding stores and stalking sleepwalking fishermen. This became particularly common in the 60s and 70s, with one sighting occurring in 1974 which spoke of a large foul-smelling hairy ape-like creature which was said to run upright on two legs in the neighborhood of Dade County, Florida. However, some people were skeptical, including investigator Joe Nickel, who stated that these reports may represent a black bear and that other sightings may in fact be hoaxes or misidentification of wildlife. In terms of appearance, the creature is said to resemble the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest. However, the skunk ape is said to be shorter in comparison. It has long patches of fur on the shoulders and arm and is often described as a mottled rusty red color as opposed to the Sasquatch's brown and black coat.
Number 5 on this list is the Munchnick House. A ghost has a firm grip over this house and refuses to let go of it. Legends of America says, built in 1885, this old home was host to frequent Saturday night parties. On one such evening, the event ran into the wee hours of Sunday morning. Having been kept up very late, a maid who had worked for the party the prior evening overslept the next morning. Rushing from her bedchamber, she ran down the back staircase to the kitchen and fell to her death. Today, witnesses report that lights from the back staircase turn on and off by themselves on Sunday mornings, followed by the smell of cooking bacon from the kitchen when nobody's there. This house, which serves as an art gallery today, was listed on the National Register of Historic Places on July 12, 1974, located at 704 North 4th Street. Now apparently the author of this article actually went there personally and they had an interaction with this ghost in person. They say, "My husband and I took a guided tour of the Munchnick House 2 years ago and I had quite an interesting experience. The nice lady who gave us the tour gave us all the history of the house when I happened to glance up to the top of the stairs and saw a young woman, maybe early 20s, peering over the edge of the banister. She seemed to be regarding us with wary curiosity as if to say, 'What are you doing here?' When we went upstairs to tour the rest of the house, no one was up there. It wasn't until we took the haunted trolley tour that I learned about the young woman who supposedly died there falling down the stairs." I'm surprised that that ghost just looked at them and didn't try to do anything else, to be honest. The ghost could have easily attacked them had she wanted to, but chose not to in that moment, which was much to the benefit of this couple. This house and its urban legend has made it so that no one actually lives here anymore except for the ghost. It's now just a spot for tourists to pop into and take a quick peek, which in all honesty is probably just pissing the ghost off even more if you think about it. Either way, I know that this couple managed to get out unscathed, but I still don't think that going to this place is the best choice. I'd avoid it if you can. Number 4 on this list is the North 3rd Street home. Nelly Trueblood. That's the name of the person who used to live here. I feel like with a name like that, this place was just destined to be haunted. Nelly was a lonely person who died alone in this house many years ago. One would think that because she was so lonely, after she died, she wouldn't have wanted to cling to this world anymore, but that's exactly what she did. The new owners bought and moved into this house and then started renovating it. Well, apparently Nelly wasn't too fond with changing things up and liked it the way that it was. Balls of light that were roughly 2 feet wide would appear out of thin air and bounce around the home, scaring the living bejesus out of the workers who were sent to renovate it. This was enough for those guys to end the renovations prematurely and leave the house unfinished. Apparently, a family member of Nelly's would later come out and say that they weren't surprised she still haunts this place. This home was deeply loved by the family, and it would make sense that she would want to keep it the way that it is. The family member assured people that she wouldn't hurt anyone, but after seeing the orbs, no one was buying into it. This home was officially listed as unlivable thanks to Nelly and her ghostly presence. Stay away from this place if you don't want Nelly and her orbs to come after you. Number 3 on this list is Theater Atcheson. The people of Kansas are gonna need to be looking to find their live performances elsewhere if they don't want to get haunted. Legends of of America says, built in 1913 as the first Church of Christ, the building was modeled after the architectural lines of its mother church in Boston. In 1973, the Presbyterian Church bought the building, and 10 years later, they created a community theater organization. Today, the building is known as the Presbyterian Community Center and is home to Theater Atcheson. Allegedly, it is also home to an unearthly spirit. Guests often describe feeling an unknown presence with them while visiting the theater, while others working in the building describe odd noises that are often heard that have no apparent earthly cause. The word unearthly makes me pause for a second there. That makes me think that we might not even be dealing with a standard ghost or spirit here, but something far worse. Some type of underworld creature that is coming to harvest people's souls. Or something similar, but from a completely different planet. Now, why an alien would decide to conduct its devilish acts inside a Kansas theater is beyond me, but I guess I'm not from another planet, so I wouldn't know. This is more than just the Shakespearean Macbeth curse, folks. This is evil and dangerous, and it's not something that you want to mess with. Number 2 on this list is the Gargoyle Home. I think gargoyles are pretty dope, honestly. They're really cool and super fun to look at. Maybe just not on my home though. Legends of America says, more often referred to as the Wagner House, this turn-of-the-century home was built in 1884 and 1885 by B.P. Wagner, who was a lawyer and politician in the Atcheson area in the late 1800s. While gargoyles are usually erected to scare off evil spirits, legend has it that Wagner accumulated his wealth through a deal with the devil, and the gargoyles were constructed in honor of the pact. It's said that the house is afflicted by an evil curse. One homeowner who attempted to remove the gargoyles fell to his death on the staircase. A segment on the Travel Channel reported that Kansas City ghost hunters, while visiting the home, picked up the presence of ghosts on their special equipment and reported having felt a presence in the house. This house was placed on the National Register of Historic Places on May 3rd, 1974, located at 819 North 4th Street. So nobody knows if the gargoyles are the thing causing the curse or if it's just a coincidence that they're there. Either way, having them there seriously adds to the mystery and ominous presence that is this home, especially considering the second someone tried to take them down, that person literally died. I'm happy that no one is living in this place now and it's on the National Register thing or whatever, but that also means that this home isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Like, this house is going to be here haunting people and maybe even taking unsuspecting people's lives for a long time. That's a really scary thought. Hopefully we can get some more professionals in here to figure out what is causing this haunting for good and how to stop it. And number 1 on this list is Jackson Park. Parks are supposed to be nice, guys. This one, it isn't. Legends of America says a woman by the name of Molly is said to haunt this park. Supposedly, moaning and terrifying screams can be heard throughout the park around midnight. According to one legend, Molly was a beautiful young woman found dead in the park the day after her prom. She was found hanging by her neck to a park tree in a hollow with badly torn clothes. Allegedly, she and her date had argued the night before, and when Molly exited the car, her date drove off, leaving her in the park. It was never determined if her death was by her own hand or was murder. Though some suspected that her prom date killed her, nobody was ever charged. Another legend of the park's haunting states that Molly was a black woman who was lynched by a white mob years ago. Rather than the eerie screams of a young prom girl, the cries instead come from the brutal slaying of an African-American Molly. In any case, the area today is known as Molly's Hollow, a couple's go-to park. In addition to Molly's chilling cries, many witnesses also claim to have seen a ghostly figure hanging in the tree where her body was discovered. Either one of those stories are bad and would have left their mark, so it makes sense why this place is the way that it is now. The pictures of this place are really pretty too, and it would definitely be a go-to date spot. You just have to be really careful that your romantic picnic doesn't get sinister and paranormal really fast. Number 5 on this list is the legend of Wall Hollow Road. Walhalla Road is actually quite a beautiful road in central Ohio. It is very long, starting out as a suburb street and then eventually transitioning into a very skinny one-way road in the middle of what feels like nowhere. As you may expect, our legend takes place in the skinny abandoned one-way section of this road. The story says that in the 1950s there was a couple that lived in a home along Walhalla Road out in the country. Now, no one is really sure what prompted the husband to do this, whether he had just gone insane or if the wife had done something that he did not approve of, but one evening he totally lost it. He grabbed the axe from the garage and brutally murdered his wife in the attic of their home. The whole story gives me some serious Jack Nicholson in The Shining type of vibes. After he had killed her, he took her body and he buried it at nighttime in the yard. Now, they weren't completely in the middle of nowhere and did have some neighbors in the area. After several weeks of not seeing the wife and strange explanations from the husband, the neighbors called the police and the truth was revealed. The man was then easily tried, convicted, and sentenced to execution. After his death, though, people started reporting seeing him around the area. When they reported this, nobody took it very seriously, considering it had been big news when he was sentenced to death and everybody had heard about it. More and more sightings came out though, and it was always the same story. They could see along the side of the road ghostly apparitions of the husband who was killing his wife. Almost as if the scene was getting played over and over and over again. The locals now swear that if you head down that road and get to the one-way, then it's very possible that you will see the ghost of our murderer replaying the killing of his wife. Number 4 on this list is the Lizard Men. Now, this is certainly a strange one, but honestly it's one of the biggest urban legends that Ohio has to offer. The legend can be traced all the way back to 1955, where it was reported that a traveling salesman spotted these strange looking creatures. Now, this story sounds a little bit ridiculous to me if I'm being completely honest, but apparently 3 lizard-like creatures that are roughly 3 feet tall were standing on their hind legs having a full-on conversation. When the man pulled up to them and couldn't believe his eyes, because it's literally these 3-foot lizards talking to each other, they whipped out a magic wand and then used their magic wand to conjure some sparks, which provided them with enough cover to then run away. Now, frankly, that part of the story sounds a lot more like my traveling salesman buddy was dipping a little bit too deep into the drink, or potentially some other illegal substances. But some of the other encounters that people have reported having with these beings aren't quite as outlandish. In 1972, for instance, a police officer was driving his car by the Little Miami River and in his headlights saw a very large creature sprint across the road and leap off a bridge into the river. He was totally blown away and said that the being was nothing like he has ever seen, painting the picture of a unique lizard-like man when he described it. Throughout the years, there have been a lot more sightings of the lizard creatures by Little Miami River, similar to that of the police officer. Up to this point, there haven't been any deaths or harm that has befallen on the people that have come across this creature, or creatures, so it isn't necessarily too scary, but I had to include it on this list simply due to the amount of sightings that people have had and how popular of an urban legend it is to the Ohio locals. Number 3 on this list is the legend of the Hatchet Man. Back in the 1800s, there was a man named Andrew Hellman who owned and operated a cemetery. One evening, Andrew was finishing up his business outside, and he was savagely attacked by an unknown assailant. The attacker had a hatchet and used it to cut Andrew's body up into little tiny pieces. This clearly wasn't enough for the killer though, who then took all of these little bits of Andrew and scattered them around the entire cemetery. Andrew was a nice man and didn't deserve this at all, and he definitely didn't deserve for his soul to get trapped in limbo like it is right now. Legend says that Andrew's spirit still wanders through this cemetery and has completely lost its mind. People have reported hearing the sound of somebody banging a hatchet on gravestones throughout the cemetery, screaming at the top of their lungs as they do it. It has also been reported that they have discovered hatchet scrapings on the tombstones in this cemetery as if somebody had slammed a hatchet on them as hard as they could. Some locals even believe that Andrew's ghost or Hatchet Man is so far gone that it has begun killing people. That if you are out in this cemetery late at night and alone, the Hatchet Man's spirit will appear, and if you see him, then this is the last thing that you will do, because you will be murdered by the Hatchet Man. Number 2 on this list is Crybaby Bridge. In Ohio, there are actually many bridges that people claim are the true Crybaby Bridge. However, when I was doing my research, the one that I heard the most about was a bridge located in Fremont. The urban legend of Crybaby Bridge was a sad one. As I imagine you've probably guessed by now, this legend includes a baby. It's said that many years ago a mother took her newborn to this bridge. The baby that she had just given birth to was unwanted. Now it's unclear why this baby was unwanted. Was she incapable of taking care of it? Was potentially her partner involved in the decision? That part of the story, it's not known. But what is known is that she took the child and she threw it into the river to drown and die. Then, after standing there and seeing her baby drown down the river, the mother threw herself over the top and killed herself the same way. People think that she killed herself out of guilt for what she had just done to her child, and this is why I think there has to have been some external factor that we don't know about forcing her to do it in the first place. Whatever the reason though, the killing of a newborn like that with the amount of guilt and emotion, it leaves something behind. The people of Utah believe that if you go to this bridge in Fremont late at night and wait there, you will start to hear the cries from a newborn baby coming from the waters below. It is also said by the locals that if you stand there long enough, then you may even encounter the phantom form of that mother. She won't cause you any harm, she will only be looking out over the waters, regretting what she had done to her child so many years ago. Number 1 on this list is the portal to hell. Located in Blue Ash, Ohio, the portal to hell is a very eerie looking drain tunnel that was reportedly used by Satanists to open up a gateway straight to hell. The exact story of how the portal was created, it isn't completely concrete, but for the most part, everybody agrees that a satanic group used part of the tunnel as a meeting ground. It was in this tunnel that they started performing their satanic rituals. They reportedly used this place for a lot of sacrifices and would slaughter live animals down there very frequently. This escalated until they made a full-on portal to hell that nobody is closed. People in the area regularly report hearing screaming coming from down inside the tunnel, with others saying that they've seen strange visuals and movements as well. David Scott and John Stevens, who run a show about paranormal activity, got wind of the portal to hell and had to go check it out for themselves to see if the rumors were true. From what they had heard, there was a demon called the Shadow Man that was lurking deep inside the tunnels near the altar room where the Satanists used to sacrifice the bodies. When they go down into the tunnel, for the first bit, everything is as it should be. It's still a super creepy tunnel, but nothing paranormal. Then, as they're super deep into the tunnel, they begin to hear footsteps coming from behind them in the darkness. Being paranormal professionals, they pull out this strange looking electronic device and start asking questions to it. Sure enough, a voice comes back to them. They go on to have a full conversation with this voice and learn that a man named Jake was murdered down here. The voice goes on to tell them that the tunnel is a prison and that they must worship Satan here. It also tells them that the Shadow Man is real and is currently down here with them. The conversation finishes with the voice basically claiming that it wants to leave this horrible place and that it is trapped down here. I'm not sure how real their interaction was with this voice, but with the history that this tunnel has had and the amount of people who have had reported sightings of beings and other odd, unexplained things, something is definitely not right about that tunnel, or the portal to hell in Blue Ash, Ohio.
From a devilish chair that makes people literally disappear to a river that will suck you in and drown you if you walk past it, here are the top 5 scary Kansas urban legends. Number 5 on this list is Stull's Gateway to Hell. Anything named Stull was just doomed from the start, guys. Thrillist says the tiny town of Stull has counted very few residents since it was founded in 1856. The most famous is rumored to be Lucifer himself, who some say appears at the town cemetery on Halloween and spring equinox. They say he uses the site where a roofless church once stood as a portal to and from hell. Some say that he's drawn to the site of frequent witch hangings. Others believe one of the graves actually contains Satan's own child. Either way, new graves continue to be dug despite signs warning against trespassers, perhaps referring directly to the Prince of Darkness himself or the cults that are rumored to flock to the grounds. The first published article about the horrors are traced back to a 1974 article in the University Daily Kansan, though whispers about evil have persisted since 1900 or so. In 1998, the hanging tree was torn down to stop people from visiting. It hasn't lessened the need for a small town to bolster an annual police presence to deter visitors looking for a glimpse of the devil himself. So we have witch hangings here, we have cults that flock here, and then we also have the worst thing of all, the literal devil potentially calling this place home. How could somebody decide to name a town Skull? That is way too close to the word skull, and it's just destined for failure. People have been smart enough not to live here all that much, and as Thrillist has said, the residents are few and far between, but it doesn't change the fact that this place is deeply haunted. If the devil truly does live here, and there is a portal to hell, then there's no telling what other crazy things can happen here. Maybe there are few residents around because the devil has been taking them. I also think it's interesting that there are more police around this place. Why would there be a bunch of police around an area where there isn't that many people? Maybe the government knows something about this place that we don't. Maybe they're hiding something and don't want locals finding out. It's just a theory, but based on the rumors around this place, I could believe it. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Chair. I am perfectly happy with my lazy boy and don't need to be sitting on any type of Devil's Chair anytime soon. Insider says the legend of the Devil's Chair goes like this. An old farmer in Alma refused to sell his land to the city in order to build a new cemetery. Someone got a little too tired of waiting for him to sell, so he was pushed into his own well. Eventually, somebody said that there was a terrible smell coming from the well, so the city sent someone to investigate. It was ruled that the well was empty and it was boarded up. Now, if you make your way to Alma, you can actually sit on the boarded up well, but legend says that people who have sat on the well have been known to mysteriously disappear. Where the heck did my dude go? He was down there in the well and then just poof, he was gone. Like, did his body go underwater and just couldn't be seen, or was there something more paranormal afoot? Well, whatever happened to the body, I guess it doesn't matter too much now because there is certainly something paranormal happening here today. If you sit on this chair, you will literally go missing. Yeah, maybe let's stop sitting on the haunted well that people have named the Devil's Chair. Maybe, I don't know, let's put a fence around it, or better yet, let's just destroy the damn thing. Number 3 on this list is Sawyer Castle. Sawyer Castle is currently haunted by the ghosts of 2 lovers who left this world far too soon. Ranker says, this haunted Kansas mansion has many gruesome tales attached to it, but certainly the most awful one involves the tragic suicides committed by a husband and wife during the Civil War. The owner of the house had gone to fight and instructed his wife to wait for the arrival of a particular ferry that he would be coming home on. When her husband did not return on that ferry, she assumed him dead and hung herself in the bell tower. However, he was in fact still alive, and upon his arriving home, he found his wife dead and killed himself out of misery. It's said that strange lights and noises emanate from the house's bell tower to this day. This story is very similar to that of a classic play, Romeo and Juliet. 2 lovers, held apart by something out of their control, take their own life in what is a clear miscommunication. Even though this was horrible, I suppose that they sort of got what they wanted. Now they're together forever, but just in ghost form. Of course, they can't just let this lie though and have to haunt this place and ruin everyone else's life who's still living here. Maybe they think that because they're still together and technically still around, that they should own the home, and anyone in it that's not them is a trespasser. Whatever it is that they think, they make it very difficult for those who go around here. I'd avoid this place altogether if I was you. Number 2 on this list is Fort Leavenworth. What happened here back in the day is enough to make anyone's hair raise. Ranker says Fort Leavenworth is considered to be one of the most haunted army bases in the US, and it's home to a number of helpful and malignant spirits. It has seen centuries of war and is home to a military prison called the United States Disciplinary Barracks. During World War II, there was a prisoner uprising, and as punishment for their unruliness, one prisoner was hung every hour for 14 hours. They quickly ran out of space in the gallows and also used one of the elevator shafts in the administration building to hang people. Ever since then, screams have been heard from that same elevator shaft at odd hours. Not surprisingly, nearly every building on the base has a horrifying story attached to it. I know that it was war and they were trying to have an uprising, but my gosh, hanging one person an hour? Like, That is just so brutal. No wonder this place is deeply haunted now. All of the spirits from back then are locked into this place and refuse to let go. And you better believe that they make the people who are still around pay for what happened in the past. People have reportedly been attacked by invisible spirits before. They've been clawed at and bitten, and one person even had their finger ripped right off of their body. Things are not pleasant at this army base, and I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been razed to the ground yet. Might be the only thing left to do to quiet these spirits down. And finally, number 1 on this list is the ghost of Saline River. You already know that this is going to be a scary legend when they have a name like that. Ranker says, according to legend, a Native American ghost by the name of Takaluma is said to walk the banks of the Saline River and was first spotted by a cowboy in the winter of 1879. Takaluma's spirit was condemned to wander the river until he found the skull of his dead father, who had been murdered by white men in the 1840s. The ghost rose from his burial mound and warned that far more powerful spirits might join in the search, but the skull has still never been found. What a horrible fate. Your father gets murdered, and then you have to spend the rest of your existence as a ghost wandering around this river searching for his skull. This ghost was once a calm presence, but time has made Takaluma angry. Now it's said that this ghost will drag unsuspecting victims into the river and drown them, then take their skull and see if he can convince the other spirits that it's his father's. This has never worked before, but when you have a literal eternity, I suppose you'll try anything. A beautiful river to look at from a distance, but not one that you want to get too close to.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Ogopogo. Let's start with a famous one. Move over, Nessie. We've got a Canadian sea cryptid to discuss. If you've ever been to British Columbia, you'll know that there are plenty of mountains and lakes to explore. One of the more well-known ones, both for its picturesque qualities and supposed housing of a monster, is Lake Okanagan. Situated in Kelowna, this lake is famous for its vacation-friendly beaches. But if you head out looking for a relaxing day on the water, you might meet up with a strange beast. Sightings of the Ogopogo date back to 1972, but indigenous legends have been telling tales of the creature for much longer. It's described as a long, slender creature with many humps and a horse head that peeks out of the lake during thunderstorms. Sound familiar? While not nearly as famous, Ogopogo is quite similar to Nessie when you get down to it. Both are aquatic, hard to find, and attract all sorts of cryptid hunters. All sorts of folks have claimed to see Ogopogo swimming around, popping its head out of the water from time to time. Photos and videos are common, but none are really verifiable or convincing. Thankfully, the creature seems to be relatively friendly. For all these sightings and rumors, there haven't been too many claims of violence or aggression from the lake-dwelling beast. In fact, it's actually quite well liked by everyone. In the 90s, the Canadian government commissioned a postage stamp in honor of Ogopogo. Way to go. Skeptics all have their explanations for what it might actually be, with one prevalent idea claiming that it's actually a primitive whale that only comes out during calmer seasons. Regardless of whether it's real or not, what's more fun to say in the end, Nessie or Ogopogo? I'll let you guys decide. Coming in at number 4, we've got the University of Toronto Phantom Worker. If a film is being shot in Toronto, you're more than likely going to catch a glimpse of U of T's campus. The school's buildings are ornate and beautiful, perfect for giving a scholarly feel to any scene. A lot of the buildings have facades that date back to the early 19th century, giving them a timeless feel. Of course, with any buildings that have been around so long, there will be ghost stories. Back in the 1920s, U of T built a Gothic memorial to honor students who had died during the First World War. During construction of this elaborate memorial, many workers were hired to help out. Legend says that one of the workers fell from the tower while polishing the bells, a true Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Ever since that fateful incident, students and faculty alike have claimed to see the ghost of the worker wandering around campus. Some even claim that there have been ghostly apparitions falling from the tower. Folks who don't know the legend will run to see if the poor fellow is okay, but never find a body. So much for being a good Samaritan. There are many other ghost stories surrounding the university as well, but none so stomach-dropping. Stonemasons with murderous qualities, little girls lost in planetariums, and a baker who managed to trap his mistress inside a secret room. The stories are real, but are the ghosts still haunting the campus? I suppose you'll have to pay the institution a visit and find out. Just try not to get roped into paying tuition, alright? That's scarier than any ghost story. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Nennerlook. We've talked about urban legends from the far west coast and the most populous city, so now let's take a trip out east. Known for its quaint, peaceful charm, Newfoundland is the last place you'd expect to find terrifying urban legends, right? I mean, you can get screeched in and end up with a scary hangover and only a faint memory of your previous night, but that's something else entirely. The monster seen near Newfoundland dwells in the sea, but does so unconventionally. How do you think sea monsters usually get around? By swimming, right? Well, this thing acts a little differently than most. First sighted by Sir Humphrey Gilbert back in the 16th century, it was described as a lion-like creature. This fits the description of an Inuit cryptid known as the Nennerlook. Legends of such a creature have been passed down through generations of people, but it was considered just a legend to outsiders until Sir Humphrey Gilbert came across it himself. The Nennerlook is a gigantic beast estimated to be as tall as an iceberg. It's got white fur, huge ears, and loves to eat anything that gets close enough. Seals are the classic meal, but it won't turn down a human if they get close. Now, back to that bit about movement. The Nennerlook doesn't swim, it walks along the bottom of the ocean. Yep, not the most efficient way to get around, but it gets the job done. Imagine watching a gigantic beast just walk out of the sea towards you. This is also the reason why people say that it's not really ever seen away from shore. It makes sense considering how deep the ocean is. But if you ever spot a little antenna poking out of the water, it's time to get a move on. And if you ever hear a deafening roar, it's probably too late. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster. We'll return to Toronto for a moment, you know, because of the urban qualities of these legends. Get it? Well, every tunnel system has its fair share of legends, and the Cabbagetown Tunnel is no exception. I'm surprised nobody's gone back and tried to get footage of this strange creature. Back in the 70s, a kitten ran away from home. While searching for his lost feline, a man came across a tunnel in Cabbagetown. Thinking that the kitten might have run in here to hide, he descended down into the abyss. Scanning the darkness for any sign of the little animal, he noticed some motion off to the side. Thinking it might be what he was looking for, the man pointed his flashlight at the movement and saw something he was definitely not expecting, neither cute nor cuddly. He claims to have seen a monkey-like creature with glowing orange eyes standing at half the height of a man covered in gray fur. If that horrible sight wasn't enough, listen to this. The man froze up and kept his light trained on the monster. The monster didn't like this much and told the man in an awful, trembling voice, "Go away. Go away." And guess what the man did next? He hightailed it out of there and didn't look back. This story made its way around for a while, but nobody ever properly looked into it. That is, until a year later. The man's friend had convinced him to share his story, so he went to the Toronto Sun with the scoop. A reporter accompanied him back to the tunnel, and they both scoured the inside. Looking around, they didn't find any evidence of a monster, but they did discover the remains of a cat. Some speculate that the tunnel leads to a point in the Toronto sewer system, and others have different ideas. Either way, nobody has seen the Cabbagetown sewer monster since. Would you go looking? Finally, at number 1, we've got the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. Heading back east for a moment, let's consider the Northumberland Strait. This is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It's said that there is a ghost ship that sails upon the strait, more often than not totally engulfed in flame. The legend dates back over 200 years and always seems to play out the same way. Folks on land will look out to see a beautiful schooner with pure white sails. As they look on, these sails will catch fire and the whole ship starts burning. Often people will head out on rescue missions only to find that there was never a ship to begin with. Legend says that the ship will only appear before a northeast wind, predicting a storm. So where does this ghost ship come from, and why does it always come back? Well, some people believe that the ship was captained by a pirate who made a deal with the devil. The ship had been fired upon and was burning fast. He wanted his treasure hidden and protected, so he signed the pact and sealed his fate. Now he and his crew are doomed to sail forever on this perpetually burning ship. Yikes. Now, skeptics will tell you that the ghost ship is simply a mirage, but if that were the case, then how do they explain the flames? How very Canadian, eh? I'm glad my homeland has some legends that can stack up against the big ones from other nations. There are plenty more where that came from too. Any real Canadian remembers reading all sorts of real Canadian ghost story books after scholastic fairs. So what did you think of the list?
Number 5, the Screaming Bridge. Now, our first Texan urban legend is a long-told story based in a real tragedy. The accident on Screaming Bridge. Geesh, if that is not a name, that sounds more like it belongs on Hogwarts campus than it does somewhere in Texas. Over 50 years ago, several students were carpooling home after their football team defeated their rivals in a major victory. The students were riding high, celebrating, and were definitely not concerned with driving safely. I mean, come on, they just won the big game. Who wouldn't be celebrating? The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was wide enough to accommodate maybe one car at a time, if that. And the students were hollering and hooting and not even remotely looking at the road, drowning out the outside world and focused on themselves and this beautiful moment in time, not worrying about their future, their surroundings, the car speeding towards them. Unfortunately,
By the time anyone could realize what was happening, it was too late to stop it. The cars collided, erupting in a horrifying explosion, claiming the lives tragically of every single person involved in this crash. Now, this bridge can only be accessed by foot now. It was then given the name Screaming Bridge, in honor of the horrible events that had happened up there. Now, local legends state that if you do journey up to Screaming Bridge and you stand looking right over at the river, you'll be able to see the apparitions of tombstones of all the victims. Goes a little further though. Visit up at midnight on the day of the crash, the anniversary. They say you're able to hear the screeching of the cars and the screaming of the victims. Hence, Screaming Bridge. Scary, scary stuff. I'm probably gonna take a little detour if I'm ever down in Arlington. I think I'm good. I'm sure there are plenty of non-haunted bridges for me to keep my feet on. And if you're looking for way more scary content, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We've got urban legends from across the globe, horror movies, true tales, cryptids, ghosts, aliens, just about everything scary you could shake a stick at. So stay subscribed, but way more importantly, stay scared. And hey, stay watching this video, okay, before you check out the rest of the channel. We got way more cryptids and urban legends to go. Number 4, the Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is one of my absolute favorite cryptids out there. I love the variants and sightings and legends because sometimes, depending on who's telling the story, the Chupacabra is described as being like an alien, reptilian, like horrible little goblin guy that runs around on all fours and is from another planet and sucking all the goats. And then sometimes in some stories the Chupacabra is just like a weird looking dog. I love it. Not all cryptids need complicated lore. Sometimes they're just a weird looking dog. Now, legends of the Chupacabra stemmed initially from Puerto Rico. Most cryptozoologists believe with stories dating back to the 1970s. Livestock was found going missing all around this one small town, Mocha, and were initially assumed to be the work of some cult, but later reported to be thought to be the cause of an animal, as all the livestock found had bite marks and their bodies bled dry. Now, the name Chupacabra literally translates to goat sucker, which is so funny that when you learn that, it is impossible to ever unlearn that. Now, this creature is a widespread phenomenon reported across the Southwest and Mexico, but Texas, of all places, seems to be a real hotbed for the creature. One very determined author, Ben Radford, who's a researcher at the Center for Skeptical Inquiry, and he even penned a book appropriately titled Tracking the Chupacabra, says that Texas is a Chupacabra factory, one of the foremost places in the world associated with the beast. One of the more recent sightings and one of the more viral ones that was going around was a few years ago in Amarillo. A zoo's security camera captured weird footage of a creature standing on its back legs that looks a whole lot like a Chupacabra or Crash Bandicoot. You decide for yourself. Number 3, the Black-Eyed Children. Our next entry details the paranormal sighting of a cryptid called the Black-Eyed Children. Nailing down the first earliest sighting of Black-Eyed Children ever is difficult since there are some conflicting reports, but most people tend to agree that the first widely recognized instance of this was from a journalist in Texas in 1996 all the way down in Abilene. Brian Bethel was a journalist working at the time, and he said he stopped in a parking lot near a movie theater to write a check. He heard a knocking on the door of his car and he looked up from his pen and paper and said, and I quote, I'm quoting him on this, he said he felt a soul-racking fear looking out at a boy and his younger brother. The boy told Bethel that he and his younger brother both wanted to catch a movie, but they didn't have any money. Bethel was uncomfortable with this, but dismissed it as just having the jitters. The two kids told him that, hey, we're just kids, nothing to be scared of, and that they didn't have any weapons, which is, you know, that's a totally normal thing that kids would say to you in a parking lot all the time to calm you down. Bethel told the boys that the movie they wanted to see was already playing and they wouldn't be able to make it in time. And since this was in 1996, we can only speculate on what they wanted to see, but I'm pretty sure it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic Jingle All the Way. Anyway, Bethel said when he broke eye contact with the young little weirdos, he found himself completely swallowed by his own fear. The boy's eyes then became completely black, obsidian as midnight on a moonless night. Bethel's story kickstarted a number of sightings of these black-eyed children across Texas and even showing up in other states. No one's got any idea just what they were or what they wanted really. Like, what are they? What are their goals? Were they even human or just creatures sort of masquerading as humans? And did they really just want to see a movie and maybe he should have just driven them down to the Cineplex? We may never get answers on that one. Number 2, the Candy Lady. Now our next story is a real sweet one. It details an old urban legend about a nightmarish figure named the Candy Lady. Does she know the Candy Man, do you reckon? I bet they would be a great fit for each other if anyone wants to set that blind date up. Anywho, the Candy Lady, despite the sweet nickname, was a ruthless criminal with little regard for her victims. Her real name was Clara Crane, but history remembers her as the Candy Lady since that's way scarier. Get ready for a humdinger of a ghost story. In 1895, she was accused of poisoning her husband by slipping him caramel candies that she had laced with something lethal. Now, a couple years before, this young couple had lost their child, causing Clara to become distraught. Clara blamed her husband for what had happened to the child, leading her to add a little extra sugar to his sweets. Oh, I'm making light of this. That's terrible. If she poisoned her husband, that's just terrible. I don't want to joke about that. Clara was deemed unfit for trial and was placed in the North Texas Lunatic Asylum, which, don't worry, thankfully received the much more pleasant name as Terrell State Hospital down the line. I can't believe that's ever what it was called before. Imagine getting sent to the North Texas Lunatic Asylum. Unfortunately, her stay at the North Texas Lunatic Asylum would not be the end of her legacy. I just wanted to say it again one more time. I'm sorry. Can you blame me? In 1903, people started going missing around the town Clara lived in. Bizarrely, relatives of the victims would report finding candies and candy wrappers around their home. Sometimes there would even be threatening little notes on these candies. Locals started speaking again of Clara Crane, the woman who infamously poisoned her husband with dark candies years back. Now here's where it gets bone-chilling. A nearby farmer found a bunch of teeth in his fields and then discovered the body of the town sheriff in his field without his choppers and forks in his eyes and candy in his pockets. Now, no one knows what truly became of Clara Crane. There's not really a lot of records for this thing, but she's become a great ghost story to locals who tell the tale of her luring people away with her sweet little treats and taking their teeth and eyes in return. Oh my god, that's giving me a toothache just talking about it. We have to move on from this one, otherwise I'm gonna have to book a dentist appointment soon. Okay, moving on. Number 1, the Donkey Lady. I saved the best for last. Our last entry is the bizarre legend of the Donkey Lady. Now there's a few variations on the origin of the Donkey Lady, but the stories always end up the same horrible way. And we'll get there in just a minute, but let's take it all the way back to the start. And to go back to the start, we gotta go sometime in the mid-1800s. The story goes that there was a family that lived near Elm Creek, way down in San Antonio. They had a modest farm property, a husband, a wife, and their children. One day, a $5 man from up north rode past their property and taunted the family for the donkey that they had. Not sure why you'd do that. He's clearly never seen a fistful of dollars. You never make fun of a man's mule. It's the fastest way to end up in a coffin. Anyway, the mule didn't take too kindly to being laughed at and bit the man over his taunting. This man was enraged and beat the donkey within an inch of its life, at which point the mother of the family came out and started to pelt rocks at this strange traveling donkey hater. The man couldn't just leave well enough alone, because as legend goes, later that night he brought a posse back to come burn down the farmhouse and blocked up all the exits to burn them inside, all over a donkey, allegedly. The farmhouse went up in flames. The only survivor, tragically, was the wife who initially had come to the donkey's defense. As she ran out of the home, her skin soaked in flame, her hands melted down to little stubs, her face deformed, skin sagging off the muscle, crispy and black, long, like a donkey's snout. She ran into the night and hurled herself into the Elm Creek, which is the last place anyone had ever seen her. Today, there's a bridge called Donkey Lady Bridge over Elm Creek, where locals claim that they've seen a creature with a donkey's face screaming at them from the window of their car. Legend has it that the spirit of the wife haunts this area and torments those who cross her bridge while grieving the unfortunate loss of her family.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Magnolia Monster. If you've ever taken a drive up the 87, you might have come across a set of very colorful, very large footprints tracked across the highway. While these particular prints were put there by people, they are in homage to the Magnolia Monster, aka Arizona's answer to Bigfoot. This big beastie lives along the Magnolia Rim and has been seen from Prescott all the way to Clifton. Sightings of the monster date back to early as 1903, with plenty of reports of video, tracks, and hair samples appearing since. People claim that the Magnolia Monster is a bipedal humanoid head, towering over most at 7 feet tall, leaving behind 22-inch footprints. Like most ape-like beasts in the woods, it has crazy strength and some wild eyes. Some claim it's covered in long black hair, others say it's reddish-brown. Maybe it changes with the seasons, or maybe there's more than one. The Mogollon monster is also known for smelling really, really bad. Like dead fish, skunk, BO, peat moss, and snapping turtle musk. I'd hide out in the woods if I smelled like that too. Part of the reason why it's so rarely sighted is that it tends to be active at night. It will hunt and gather all sorts of different foods under cover of darkness and make little nests for itself. If you stumble across one of these pine needle refuges, get the hell out of there. This beefy monster is known to be very territorial and very violent. It reportedly likes to decapitate deer and other wildlife before digging in, and if it can pull the dome off a deer, it can pop your top off like a bottle of Coke. Be careful if you hear any weird noises too, because the Mogollon monster likes to mimic other wildlife. Birds, coyotes, it is even reported to shriek like a woman in distress. So don't go running off to save the damsel, because you might find yourself face to face with a very hairy hunter. Tie up your supplies if you're camping too, as the monster will rummage through stuff left out.
You know, they were all about the hairy man or the wild man or something like that. And of course I didn't believe them.
This, says Wade, is a small baby Bigfoot trying to hide in the corner from his night vision camera.
Coming in at number 4, we've got El Chupacabra. Ah, the Southwest classic. Such a strange creature, the Chupacabra. Is it an alien? A demon dog? Something else? Also known as the goat sucker, these cryptids love to feed on livestock, attacking in the night. Farmers and other animal owners have often found these creatures totally hollowed out following particularly dark nights. Common features of the Chupacabra attacks are a complete lack of blood and puncture wounds in the neck and hindquarters. The wounds are always super clean, no signs of struggle or messiness. Sometimes there are weird injuries too. Cattles often have their anuses cored out, and somehow, even with these brutal injuries, no blood is found. Do the goat suckers inject some sort of sedative? Do they have magical powers? We may never know. One theory is that they have wings and descend on their prey and drain them before they have time to react. This would also explain the lack of tracks that accompany Chupacabra attacks. Although, if they were so quick and clever, wouldn't they also attack humans? Maybe our blood just doesn't taste as good. Now, this legend didn't start in Arizona, but now it's quite prevalent. El Chupacabra seems to have originated in Puerto Rico and made its way into Latin America, eventually spreading to the southwestern states. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find an Arizonan without some sort of Chupacabra story. Tucson resident Billy Nubian claims that he saw one attacking his goats late one night. He was startled awake by the panic sounds of his goats bleeding. Running outside to investigate, he saw a huge rat-like creature pinning one of his goats. It then turned to face Billy, let out a blood-curdling scream, and ran off into the dark. Sarah A. has a similar story where she encountered a half-man, half-ape creature crouching frog-style in her yard. Freaky. Coming in at number 3, we've got skinwalkers. These Navajo legends have been cited all over, but have quite a reputation in Arizona. Medicine men possessed by spirits having to choose between good and evil. Often hermits being exiled from their communities. They take the forms of many animals and travel through the wastes. If driving through the arid desert at night wasn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear about what skinwalkers like to do. Often they'll travel alongside lone vehicles in the dark, even when the car is hoofing it. They'll tap on the windows of the vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention. If the driver stops to see what's going on and gets out of their car, it's not likely that they're coming back. Yikes. There are some hot spots that locals try to avoid at night. Apparently there's a ranch that has been given the name Skinwalker Ranch, thanks to the huge amounts of reports made. And San Carlos Reservation is also a place most will warn you away from during the night. Although most forests at night have their fair share of spooky denizens. There's one tale of a man camping alone that really makes you question whether a little adventure is worth it or not. He was hiking along with his dog and found an empty cave to set up camp in. As he unpacked his stuff, he noticed some unsettling cave paintings along the walls. Later that same night, he was woken up by his dog ferociously barking. As he sat up to see what was the matter, he saw a malformed creature slinking near the entrance of the cave. Acting quickly, he shot at it with his rifle, but this only stunned the creature. It called out to him, saying that it wanted to help. Sure. At this point, the man grabbed his dog and hightailed it out of there, leaving all his stuff. He hasn't gone back since. Hopefully he didn't leave anything too valuable behind, although he did escape with his dog and his life, which are valuable enough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Haunted Antique Mall. Back to Tucson for more terror and troubles, there's an old 2-story furniture store that was converted into an antique mall of sorts. You know the kind, set up like a flea market with all sorts of independent booths selling their wares. Well, one day customers were walking around upstairs looking at the assorted antiques, and they heard some clicking noises. One particularly curious antiquer decided to investigate and found the source. an old typewriter. The thing is, no one was around to operate it. The customers who had heard the typing were the only people upstairs. After that, more and more ghostly tales appeared. Furniture that was left neat and tidy at closing would be strewn throughout the aisles the next morning. Radios would increase in volume with no one around. Employees found themselves frozen in place from time to time, experiencing a distortion of time. They would be stuck there as customers passed by in fast or slow motion. Apparitions would appear all over, sometimes appearing as a grinning boy, other times as a mischievous-looking teenager. Nobody knows who these wraiths belong to. After hearing loud crashing noises upstairs but finding nothing displaced, the owners decided it was time to close down the upper level. Now, considering that all sorts of people were bringing in antiques from different sources, it is possible that all these ghosts came from haunted objects. Or it could be that the furniture store itself is haunted. Nobody's come up with concrete proof of the hauntings, but if you ever find yourself antiquing in Tucson, watch out for paranormal activity. And finally, at number 1, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. I mean, the name of this canyon should be enough to give me to its bad news. Let me say it again. Slaughterhouse Canyon. Come on. The tale that accompanies the terrifying name comes from the gold rush back in the 1800s. A young family moved out to try their hand at striking it rich. However, this plan did not go very well. Soon they were hungry and destitute. The father would often head out for days, searching for food to sustain him and his family. Tragically, one day he never returned. Without the father to keep them fed, the family slowly starved. As their bodies wasted away, so too did their minds. Eventually, the mother couldn't take it anymore. Her children's cries were too much for her to bear. She donned her wedding dress and ritualistically killed her children. Carrying the corpses down to the nearby river, she wept and screamed. After she dropped their bodies into the water, she wandered around until succumbing to starvation soon after. This sad story forever marred the reputation of Slaughterhouse Canyon. Now, if you visit at night, you might be able to hear the pained cries of the murderous Mad Mother. Tragic and terrifying. And there you have it. Arizonan urban legends to keep you up at night and maybe inspire you to visit someday. What did you think of the list? Can any locals give me the nod? What Arizona legends did I neglect to add?